Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Adobe XD Daily Creative Challenge. My name's Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and I hope you're all doing well on this, was it Thursday? Thursday afternoon, possibly Friday, wherever you are in the world. And if you are tuning in live here on Behance, let me know in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from. We've got Kareem and Marcia and Sam, Cornell, Susan, Thomas, and Mohammed, Megan, Sean, Lexine, and Kita. Great to see all of you. The Boop House, the Boop Gang, or whatever, Boop Squad, I think it is what Megan calls it, is here. We're all together again for day number 3, I think it is. Or is it 4? Day number 3 of the XD Daily Creative Challenge. So let me go ahead and hop over to my screen, and we're just going to dive into things. So we started off the week on Tuesday tackling a landing page, and I will remind everybody, I'll show you more details in a second, but for day number 1, we did something a little bit different, and I'll show you some more information about that in just a moment. We tackled an interactive map yesterday using scroll groups. That was a lot of fun. I've been looking at some of all of your work on Discord, and also some of you have been tweeting it at me as well, so which is amazing. And today we're tackling a drop-down menu, but I'm going to shake things up a little bit because I know a lot of you are already starting to work on your drop-down menus, and I'm not going to stray too far off the path, but I'm going to show you a different thing you can do using nested hover in Adobe XD. So Greta's saying, first time watching live. Thank you, Greta. Welcome to the crew. And who else do we have in here? Leah, and Undine, and Van, Ella. Great to see all of you in the chat today. All right, so let me hop over to Discord, because you can also join us in our Discord community chat right over here. So let me hop over there, and here is all the information about the daily challenge as well. You can hop in here. There's 55,000 designers in Discord. But like I was mentioning a few minutes ago, for the first challenge number 1, we're running an XD designer spotlight where Matt Ray, he was over there. He was on the sidebar a second ago. But Matt Ray is going to be picking one of you who creates something super unique and original and fun and exciting using a little bit of a background blur in XD, and he's going to be interviewing. And we're going to hopefully continue doing this. Maybe, I don't know if it's going to be every single time, but we're testing the waters, seeing how it goes. But I think it's a fun, new, exciting way to introduce these challenges and also get some of you involved. So Sam just posted the rules in the chat. You're also going to use the keyword XD Creative Challenge. So the first challenge, if you want to be selected, is XD Creative Challenge, and then after that, XD Daily Challenge. All right, so today, again, we're tackling sort of like a drop-down menu. You're absolutely free, if you feel comfortable, to go down the drop-down menu route, but I'm going to take it in a little bit of a different direction. But we are going to be using nested hover, which as of XD34, which was released at Adobe Max this past October, is now possible. So I'm going to hop back over to Behance, and I'm going to press the Get Started button. It's going to open up this web page, and it's going to download the file through Creative Cloud. And then in just a second, they're pretty small files, it's going to open up directly in Adobe XD. Isn't that fancy? If you're brand new to these challenges, doesn't probably mean much to you. But if you're a veteran, you probably have known that we started off using Dropbox for these templates. Dropbox is great, but we wanted to kind of bring things in-house. Then we went to CC Libraries, but now we just click on it, opens up in XD. Can't get much better than that, can you? So here is some inspiration that you might want to use for your drop-down menu or your notification center. And we're going to actually kind of go in this direction for our design today. So hope you're all ready. Hope you're all doing well. Let's hop over to this artboard here. And I want to start. We're going to get fancy today. And some of you may have seen this design. I've used it recently, but we're going to use bright colors, neon. We're going to use toy faces. It's going to be pretty fancy. So I'm going to grab my rectangle and just draw out a box across this entire artboard. And I'm doing that just so I can use this shape as a mask for the image I want to put in there for the background. Paul is saying, what version are you using for Adobe XD? So I'm using the latest version, which is 35.1.12.5. As long as you have 34 or newer, you'll be able to use nested hover in XD, but I would recommend, always keep your XD version up to date. All right, so I'm gonna hop over to Finder, right over here, and I've got some great looking images of neon stuff that I grabbed from Adobe stock. I have so many folders of random things like neon images that I grabbed from Adobe stock, which is great. So I'm gonna pop this in here, boop, just like that. And I'm gonna use this as the background image. Now you're probably thinking, this is a lot. There's a lot going on in this image. How are you gonna make things look good on this? We're gonna use background blurs, because of course we are, right? So one more time, I'm gonna grab my rectangle. Fancy Thursdays, yes, indeed. And I'm gonna drag out a rectangle across this artboard just like this. I'm gonna make sure to place it in the center, and I'm gonna round out the corners just a little bit, somewhere around 24 pixels, sticking with that 8 pixel grid. And for the background color, I'm gonna set it to black. Now, you're probably even more confused. We've got this black rectangle on this fairly dark background, aside from these neon lights. What's the deal here? So we're gonna do a few things to separate this shape from the background. Now, of course, as you're designing, if you wanna go light, feel free, have fun with it. Do whatever colors you feel necessary. So down here inside of the Properties Inspector, I'm gonna first turn on a background blur. Interesting, right? Not too bad. You gotta be careful with background blurs, because if you don't blur it enough, although that looks pretty cool. Like if it was just standalone, like credit card or something, this looks pretty cool. But if you don't blur it enough, or you have it too light or too dark, right, you can cause accessibility problems. So it'll be a little bit difficult to see some of the content on top of it. So I'm gonna blur it quite a bit. I'm gonna set the brightness to 0. But what I want to do is right down here, the effect opacity, I'm gonna bring some of this up. So essentially what it's doing is it's taking the base color, which is our fill color, and it's bringing some of that color back in. Whoops, there's my dock. Let me put my dock back down there, right? So we're bringing some of that black color in. So we just have a little bit of this color from the background seeping through. And as I move this around, you can kind of see that taking place. And of course, you can play around with the amount of blur if you want, but I'm going to keep it all the way maxed up. But another thing we're going to do is we're going to add a border, a very subtle border. So I'm going to crank up the brightness. So it's basically going to be a white border. Set the size at 2. That's a little bit too strong. So I'm going to go into the border settings and just bring down the opacity quite a bit. So there's a very nice subtle border around, 10%, something like that, right? It just helps a little bit separate this shape from the background. But of course, the contents of this shape are what's most, or this container are what's most important. So right here at the top, we're going to add a few elements. Starting with the rectangle, we're going to drag out and we're going to create a search bar. We're going to round out the corners just a little bit, about 8 pixels. Looks pretty good. And then I'm going to set the color to black. There's a lot of dark colors going on, and I'm going to add a little bit of a border, right? And then, let's do this and reduce the opacity of the shape quite a bit. And reduce the opacity of the border. Now this is looking a little bit hard to see. Sean is saying add a drop shadow. You can absolutely add a drop shadow as well. Yeah, this is a little bit difficult to see. Maybe let's go a little bit lighter. We'll do something like that. Just gotta make sure that things are visible, right? Just play around with this, and as all of you are going through this process, I would certainly expect you would take a little bit more time than I do. One more thing over here to the right, we're going to round out the corners one more time, and this is where our avatar is going to be, and this is actually what's going to trigger the hover initially, right? And I'll show you that in a moment. So we've got this looking pretty good, and we may want also a status indicator, whether this user is online or offline. So with an ellipse, I'm going to draw one out right about there. And this user possibly might be offline. So I'm going to change the color to a nice red. And then to make sure it doesn't clash with any of the colors behind it, Sean says, no, don't do that. Oh no, what did I do? What did I do? I mean, it's probably a combination of all this stuff. I'm probably going to change this. We'll get to that. It's just not looking good right now. All right, so that's looking okay, but of course we need an avatar. So I'm going to hop over to my libraries panel, and I'm going to go into my Toy Faces library. I love this library. And by the way, let me hop over to Safari one more time. Here's Toy Faces, and do a quick Google, or Sam can post in the chat. Amazing avatars. They're super cute, super diverse, and they just look great on all of your projects. So let's go ahead and grab one of these. Let's see which one. There's so many options. Let's pop that one right in there. Perfect. All right. Again, I'm going to change the search bar at the top. It's not looking great, but I do want to get to a few other things. So is this design going to have light mode? Possibly. I won't have time to do it in this stream, but I would encourage all of you to explore all the sorts of designs. All right, so now down here, we may want a few additional things. The first thing, of course, we might want all of our friends. So I'm going to grab a rectangle. It's going to snap into place. That's not a rectangle. That is an ellipse. That's what it's called. I'm going to drag out an ellipse just like that. Again, these are going to be all of our friends that are going down this artboard. So there's one friend there. And over to the right, we're going to type out the person's name. And we're going to go for one of the best fonts in the world, best typefaces, Poppins. Everyone's saying Toyfaces is amazing. Yeah, perfect marketing. Isn't that great? It just looks so colorful and amazing. All right, so we've got that. Let me bring this down a touch because it's a little bit too large. We'll make it maybe medium, and we'll change the color to white. All right. Let's see what this looks like. I stress this a lot, right? I find myself, I don't know if all of you, let me know in the chat, I don't know if you're all like this, but I find myself designing very close to the elements. Like, I'm very close right now, and you lose track of that perspective. So from time to time, just to kind of see how things are looking, in addition to checking out the spacing, which I'll try 16, just press the play button at the top, just to kind of see how things are looking like that, right? It's okay. And I'm going to drag this down here, and this could be some sort of a status. And a rectangle with many angles, Sean's saying. So this might be down here, maybe a status of what they're doing. Maybe Brett is eating a burrito, right? I actually had a burrito for lunch today. It was delicious. So let me do that, and maybe I'll just, yeah, medium or regular looks okay. Bring this down a touch, maybe drop the opacity just a little bit, just so we know it's secondary information, right? And again, we're going to hop into the preview just to take a look. I think I definitely want to bring this in. So I'll go about 8 pixels from the side of the shape. All right, that's looking okay. Of course, once we start adding avatars and faces and all that fun stuff, it's going to look even better. Now over to actually one thing I want to do is, I've got the shape here. It's about 22 pixels. I'm going to actually make it 24 pixels from the left. And I want to make sure to do the same thing from the right-hand side. So this one is 35. That's not good. So boop, and just one over, and then we have 24. That looks pretty good. Drag this out a touch. Perfect. And that will allow us to really start lining things up. So if I dive in here and I just create with the pen tool, I just turned on my grid, by the way. I'm just going to create a very simple arrow, just like that. Right? And you can turn on the grid with your Command and Control apostrophe icon, or if you have an artboard selected, there we go. You can turn on the grid right down at the bottom. All right, so again, this will allow me to just make sure everything's lined up really nicely. I can round out those caps, round out that, and that looks pretty good. But I'm gonna drop it in opacity just a little bit. All right, fancy. So we essentially have one of our friends, right? We have Brett who's eating a burrito, but he's faceless. And we want a lot more friends going down our artboard. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure to select all of these elements. So I've got his name selected, I've got his status, and I also have this icon over to the right. So I've got all of these elements selected. And then at the very top right-hand corner of your properties inspector, you're going to press repeat grid. Boop. Right? And that will give you these two handles, one at the right and one at the bottom. And you can just drag out additional friends going all the way down this container. And you can adjust the spacing by just hovering in between, right? Just like that. And I do want to purposely make one of them kind of peeking up from the bottom so that users who are previewing this know that they can scroll. But right now, if you were to press the play button and try to scroll, nothing's really happening, right? So like we discussed yesterday when we were talking about interactive maps, we need to set up a scroll group. And move this up a little bit. There we go. So over within your properties inspector, we have 3 options for scroll groups. We have horizontal scroll, vertical scroll, and what we explored yesterday, horizontal and vertical. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on a vertical scroll. That's going to give me these new handles. The one at the top didn't really move. Probably don't need it to move. But the one at the bottom, we want to just snap just like that with the container, right? I'm going to dive in here, adjust the repeat grid a little bit. Let's take a look. It's not bad. It's a little bit squishy, but it's not too bad. But now that we've created this scroll group, we can easily just scroll up and down and see all of our friends. All of them named Brett, and all of them are eating burritos. Sounds like a good time, right? There we go. Perfect. But of course, we want more names. We want more faces. So we can utilize the functionality of a repeat grid. Yeah, and Kita, so many Bretts eating burritos, but we want to change that, right? So let's go ahead and just select a bunch of faces. And of course, you can drag one at a time if you really wanted to, right? So Brett, drag that in there. See, a lot of Bretts. You can drag another one in there, right? You can do those sorts of things. But you can also select many of them at once. So I can select 1 and 2. I'm just going down and holding down my Command or Control key and just clicking 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't know how many I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I probably have about 9 or 10. So let's 7, 8, 9. I don't think there'll be a baby on this particular platform, but there we go, right? And now, whoop, boop, drag them all in directly into the grid. And Umacorn says, you've never had a burrito before? Oh my gosh. And Lexina's hungry. I'm hungry. I've got a bag of Chipotle chips right beside me. I wasn't lying. I literally had a burrito for lunch. And now I'm hungry again. Look what I've done to myself. And all of you, apparently. All right, so we've got this looking pretty good. And again, just these toy faces make everything look so much better. Now, of course, for the names, right? We can also utilize a plugin. Let me hop into my plugins panel. And there is a plugin called Repeater, or Repeater, I don't know how to pronounce it. But I'm going to go ahead and select that, press Generate. And this will allow me to select various things, right? So I can select, I can select the Brett text layer, which is the name, right? And I can choose, let's say, names and jobs. And I can choose first names. And both genders, sure, why not? And I'm going to go ahead and press Add. And it's going to add names there. I can keep pressing Add. No, it does. Okay. I thought for a second that it does. If you keep pressing Add, it will regenerate, but that's fine. There's Caroline, right? Hey, whatever, right? It works. It looks great. But you got some names in there. So that looks pretty good. And they're all eating burritos, but of course, throw some interesting ideas in the chat. What should they be doing? I'm going to keep it at eating burritos for now, but if we press play one more time, we can kind of see, if we can scroll down, everything looks pretty good. But of course, the focus of this challenge is to utilize hover effects. So this is what we're going to do. We're actually going to set up an additional item before we get on to things. So in the scroll group, I'm actually going to set up an additional rectangle like this. I'm going to move this outwards a little bit. And just like that, right? Now you're probably asking, why are you doing this? What in the world are you doing? And what I'm doing here is I'm setting up a hover state, or we're going to set up a hover state, right? And this will allow me to set up basically a very subtle hover without actually worrying about breaking any of the repeat grids. It'll all make sense, I hope. We'll see. Let me move this up a little bit. There we go. Let me adjust the scroll group just a touch. It's a little bit difficult to see. I have these blinding lights in my face, so the colors look different. So if things are a little bit difficult to see, I do apologize. But it's hard for me to see colors right now because of these lights. All right, so that's looking okay, right? But we want to use this as, let me move this. I'm very particular about my spacing. All right, so we want to create a hover effect using this, right? So I'm going to go ahead and select this item. I'm going to turn it into a component. So I can either do that in the Properties Inspector, the Libraries panel, Command or Control K, and I've got my default state. But in the default state, I want this to be completely empty, right? So I'm going to dive in here, select that, and just turn down the opacity. And then I'm going to create one more state, or one state. I'm going to create a hover state just like that. And I'm going to dive in again and bump it up to 10%. Perfect. All right. What is the name of the plugin again? So that plugin was called Repeater, Repeator. That's the one there. All right. Perfect. Okay, that looks pretty good. And what we can actually do is we can grab this component. I'm going to copy it. I'm actually going to pop it inside. This may not work as I expected. No, it won't. I'm going to undo this. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put it into the repeat grid. You could have, but I'm going to leave it outside the repeat grid. And we can create another repeat grid with just this, right? And just make sure that these line up just like that, right? And just drag this down. Now, of course, by default, we want this to be off. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I select any of them inside of this repeat grid and just change it over to the default state. That way, if I press the play button, we can now hover over any of these and it's going to look fantastic. Now you're noticing a little bit of a delay, right? And that's because the prototype, the interaction is set to auto-animate, but there's really nothing to animate in this case. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to hop into prototype mode, change this to transition and none. That way I can just go right up and down and hover, right? Now, that's one hover effect, but we're talking in this challenge about nested hover. So you might envision, right, that maybe when this particular profile photo is hovered over top of, the whole thing appears, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure to pop both of these into a group. Command and Control G, I'm going to call this avatar. I'm going to move this on top. And what I want to do, Megan says, I wish hover wouldn't default to auto animate. Yeah, there's definitely certain cases where I definitely want auto animate. I wish it was smart enough to detect, is there something that's moving or enlarging? If so, auto animate. If not, transition. I've suggested it to the team. Maybe it'll come in the future. Who knows? So we've got the avatar at the top and we want to include everything else inside of this particular component, right? So I'm going to make sure to select all these elements here and I'm going to either right click or press the plus button or in the assets panel, a lot of different ways. And we've got our new state, right? So we have a component. I should probably name this. And notifications. Did I spell that right? I probably did. There we go. So I have my notifications component. And now again, I don't want all of this other information to be displayed initially. So I'm going to dive in here. Let me actually make sure to group some of these. Friends list. And I'm going to just simply turn it off. Just like that, right? So we have our little notification looking great right there. And now we want on hover, we want it to display our friends list. So I'm going to press the plus button one more time, create a hover state, and all we have to do is dive in here and show the friends list, right? So we have our default state and our hover state, and now I can press play. Whoops, I should go back to our default state. Press play, hover, there it is. What is going on? I messed something up. Maybe let me actually go ahead and change this to transition. None. There we go. That looks pretty good. We've got our hover state looking good. We've got all this fun stuff in here. Press play. Should go back to the other one. There we go. Okay, something's going on. Something strange. Actually, let me do this. Let me do this. In the default state, I'm going to show this, but I'm going to turn the opacity down to 0. And then hover state, I'm going to dive in here. Friends list, opacity 100%. There we go. So essentially what was happening, I caught my error, right? In the initial state, what I did originally is on the friends list, I had the opacity at 100%, but I hid the layer completely, which told XD to just focus on this as the hover state, right? Or the hover trigger. So anything outside of this, it would cancel out that trigger. So just make sure that if you're going in this direction, just set the opacity at 0 so that the layer is still there, right? And now you can hover away, right? And of course you can combine this with AutoAnimate, kind of like what we're talking about a little bit earlier is, maybe I don't want it to just appear. Maybe I want it to slide in from somewhere. So maybe in an example, maybe the little avatar is up here at the top right-hand corner. There might be a toolbar up there. There might be a lot of different things. So in this case, in the default state, instead of hiding it, I can actually just push it over to the side, right? And then hover state, I'm going to dive in here, bring this back in, just like that, right? Now I probably shouldn't have it right on the edge, But you know what? That's okay. We're going to run with it. And now what we want to make sure to do is in prototype mode, instead of, so we've got our hover right over here, right? So instead of the transition, we want AutoAnimate. Let's do a nice ease in and out, 0.6 seconds, and then whoop, there it goes, right? Fancy. So there's a lot of different ways you can take this challenge. You can do a standard drop down. You can do a notification center just like this. Have fun with it. I know mine was probably a little bit more complicated, but I want to give all of you some interesting and fun ideas. So looking forward to seeing what all of you do with this challenge. Make sure to upload it to Discord. You can also tweet it at me if you want to, and I will be back tomorrow with my masterclass and also the Daily Creative Challenge, day number 4. Stick around. Kyle T. Webster's coming up in just a few minutes with amazing things. He's always drawing some fancy stuff, and at the end of his class, you can tell him what to draw, which will be a lot of fun. So thanks to everyone, and I'll see you all tomorrow.